The House Oversight Committee is intensifying its investigation into allegations of massive fraud within Minnesota's social services programs, with federal prosecutors estimating the potential losses could reach into the billions of dollars. This probe, led by Chairman James Comer, Archie, has now summoned 7 current and former state officials for transcribed interviews and sought cooperation from top federal officials, including Attorney General Pam Bondi and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The investigation centers on widespread misuse of federal funds intended for child nutrition, housing stabilization, autism services, and Medicaid programs. What began as a focused inquiry into the nonprofit, Feeding Our Future has ballooned into a broader examination of systemic failures under Governor Tim Walz's administration, raising questions about oversight, potential complicity, and the flow of taxpayer dollars potentially linked to international destinations like Kenya and Somalia. The scandal traces back to the COVID-19 pandemic, when federal child nutrition programs were expanded to provide meals to children amid school closures. The Minnesota-based nonprofit Feeding Our Future was tasked with distributing these funds, but allegedly became a vehicle for one of the largest pandemic-era fraud schemes in U.S. history. Federal prosecutors in Minnesota have charged over 78 individuals, with more than 59 convictions to date for stealing upwards of $250 million. Defendants allegedly created shell companies, inflated meal counts to absurd levels, claiming to serve more children than existed in entire communities, and laundered the proceeds through luxury purchases, real estate, and wire transfers abroad. For instance, one key figure, Abdelaziz Shafii Farah, was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $47.09 million in restitution for his role in the scheme. Recent charges include a 36-year-old man indicted for wire fraud and money laundering, marking the 78th defendant in the Feeding Our Future case. The fraud wasn't limited to child nutrition. Prosecutors have expanded their scrutiny to housing stabilization programs, where over $104 million was allegedly defrauded by falsely claiming services for at-risk individuals, and autism treatment programs with $14 million siphoned off for non-existent therapies. In total, federal authorities estimate over $1 billion in taxpayer funds may have been stolen across these schemes. 2018. A New York Times investigation detailed how the fraud swamped Minnesota's social services system, with state regulators reportedly reluctant to act due to fears of political backlash or accusations of bias against the Somali American community. The Somali diaspora in Minnesota, the largest in the U.S., has been both perpetrators and victims in these cases. With community leaders emphasizing that the fraudsters do not represent the broader public. On December 19, 2025, U.S. prosecutors announced the probe's expansion to 14 Medicaid-funded programs, which have disbursed approximately $18 billion since 2018. Acting U.S. Attorney Joseph H. Thompson described it as staggering industrial-scale fraud, noting that a significant amount of these funds likely fell victim to scams. Some of the misappropriated dollars have been traced to real estate investments in Nairobi, Kenya, and indirectly to Somalia, where there are unconfirmed concerns about funds reaching militant groups like Al-Shabaab. However, Thompson stressed there is no indication that the defendants were radicalized or intentionally funding terrorist groups. This expansion follows earlier revelations, including a September 2025 indictment involving a suspect who allegedly stole $465,000 from Feeding Our Future and $14 million from autism programs, even paying kickbacks to parents. In August 2025, 3 more individuals pleaded guilty, bringing the total convictions in the Feeding Our Future case to over 50. The Walz administration has responded by establishing a centralized state fraud investigations unit and pausing licensing for adult daycares amid ongoing probes. Chairman Comer escalated the congressional oversight on December 22, 2025, by sending letters to 7 Minnesota officials requesting in-person transcribed interviews. The list includes current officials like Emily Honey, Director of Nutrition Program Services at the Minnesota Department of Education, scheduled for January 26. January 2020. Former officials summoned include ex-commissioners Jody Harpstead, Mary Catherine Ricker, Tony Leary, and others, with dates extending into early February. The letters warn that failure to appear voluntarily could lead to compulsory processes, such as subpoenas. Connor also requested briefings from the Justice and Treasury Departments by January 9, 2026, to assess federal involvement and potential money laundering. In a statement to Fox News Digital, Comer said, whistleblowers have made it clear that American taxpayers were defrauded in Minnesota, raising serious questions about whether Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison failed to act or were complicit in the theft. Earlier, Comer had demanded documents from Walz and Ellison by December 17, 2025, alleging cover-ups and retaliation against whistleblowers. Whistleblowers claim state employees are destroying evidence, and Comer has urged preservation of records. The probe also scrutinizes Ellison's role, including a leaked 2021 audio where he met with Feeding Our Future affiliates, discussed campaign donations, and allegedly pledged support despite his office representing state agencies in related lawsuits. Ellison has denied wrongdoing, but Republicans have pressed for transparency on donations, noting $10,000 received from implicated individuals. Governor Walz, a Democrat seeking a third term in 2026, has acknowledged the issue falls on my watch and vowed to fix it. In remarks on December 20, 2025, he expressed outrage over any fraud but cast doubt on the billion-dollar estimates, calling them sensationalism without proof. Walz highlighted his partnership with federal authorities, noting he halted payments to suspect programs in July 2025 after gaining authority to do so. Walz has welcomed federal investigations, stating in November 2025 that he supports probes into claims of funds reaching Somalia. His administration appointed a new anti-fraud official in December 2025 and expanded state-level investigation. However, critics like Republican gubernatorial candidate Dr. Scott Jensen accuse Walz of a cover-up, worse than Watergate, pointing to delays in action and blame shifting to federal agencies. PolitiFact has rated Walz's claims of putting people in jail as misleading, noting that federal authorities, not his administration, handled prosecutions. Ellison's office has shut down 17 sham nonprofits and pursued civil actions, but questions linger about early awareness. The scandal has become a flashpoint in Minnesota politics, with Republicans leveraging it to challenge Democratic control ahead of the 2026 elections. The State House created a Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Policy Committee in February 2025, chaired by Rep. Kristen Robbins, R. Maple Grove, to address ongoing issues. Nationally, the probe ties into broader concerns about pandemic aid oversight. House Budget Committee Chairman Jody Arrington, R. Texas, criticized Democrats for resisting anti-fraud measures. The Small Business Administration is investigating Somali-linked groups, and the Trump administration has cited Minnesota fraud in decisions to end deportation protections for Somalis. Community impacts are profound. Funds meant for vulnerable children, the homeless, and those with disabilities were diverted, exacerbating inequalities. Somali Minnesotans, often victims of these scams, face heightened scrutiny. As the investigation unfolds, with interviews slated for January and February 2026, more revelations are expected. Fox News Digital reached out to Walz's office, Ellison's office, the Minnesota Department of Human Services, and the Department of Education for comment, but responses were not immediately available. This evolving story underscores the challenges of balancing rapid aid distribution with robust safeguards, a lesson that could reshape social services oversight nationwide.